I'm Alyson Campbell. I'm a college planning consultant with Estrela Consulting, and I am here tonight with Reid Meyer, who is a co-founder of Athletes to Athletes, and I am so excited to share alongside of him. We are two former college athletes. I like to call us retirees. I feel
I
like
think
that's
that's a fair statement.
yeah, we're retired. We're retirees. And we're going to share with you a little bit about the landscape and, what is going on with the college athletics landscape. And those of you that are looking to pursue it, probably dispelling some myths for you tonight or some common things that you're seeing. So I promise that this 45-ish minutes is going to be packed full of really good information. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please drop them in the Q&A. I will monitor that at the very end. So I can't see them live as they're kind of popping up. So we'll check that out at the end and we're going to get started. So again, my name is Alyson Campbell, like I had mentioned, and I've been with Estrela Consulting for about 1.5 years, but my background is in higher ed. So for about 10 years, I worked at Baldwin Wallace University, which is a small liberal arts college outside of Cleveland. And I went to school there. I worked as a women's college basketball coach and a women's college golf coach. And that's also where I played Division III athletics. I'm also a former admissions professional at that university at my alma mater, and I worked for a number of years at Ohio State. And like I said, we're joined tonight with Reid Meyer. He's the founder and CEO of Athletes to Athletes, also former Division I college baseball player at Texas Tech, did a year at junior college. And then I'm going to let him talk just a quick bit about his story, kind of going from that Power 5 baseball experience, jumping to junior college, and then finishing elsewhere. So do you want to just quickly give us a little overview of your experience, Reid?
Yeah, of course. So my certainly didn't take a traditional route through college. I actually went to 4 schools in 4 years. Started as a scholarship athlete at Texas Tech University. Made that decision purely based on the fact that it was a Big 12 Power 5 conference school. They were giving me some money. That sounded cool. Realized very quickly that fit is far more important than simply who's going to kind of give you scholarship aid. And so moved back down to a junior college. This was before the transfer portal, and actually ended up transferring to the University of Texas at Austin as a full-time student. Did a couple of courses at another junior college to sort of be able to graduate on time, but left baseball behind. So played for 2 years, was a full-time student for 2 years, and that's a lot of what kind of inspired me to move into the independent counseling role or consulting role, working, exclusively with student athletes.
And can you speak just real quickly about the Student Athlete Advisors Group? I've got so much information from that group. It's such a wealth of knowledge, the team that you lead alongside. Can you just tell us a little bit about that group?
Yeah, of course. So the Student Athlete Advisors Group is essentially a co-op of 4 student athlete advisors. We all coached or played in college athletics at varying different levels: Division II, Division I, Division III, junior college, everything in between. And we're basically a consortium of content. So we have a running blog that we do. We will present to different conferences and different organizations, partner with awesome groups like y'all to come in and help speak on some of the student athlete experiences, partner with other consultants on these aspects. So really just we try to be kind of a one-stop shop for families and for counselors alike to be able to kind of demystify some of these things that exist in the student athlete space and just get a little better understanding of what that landscape looks like.
Yeah, it's a great resource. I highly recommend checking it out. And I will add the contact information for that group when we send this recording out.
Awesome. Thank you.
So topics we are going to tackle tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about reality check. So what are the numbers going to tell us about the current landscape in college athletics? Also leveling up. So do you know the difference between a Division I, Division II, Division III, JUCO, NAIA school, some other smaller like one-off conferences or associations? We're going to talk about the importance of being a student athlete. This is something that I am very passionate about, coming from a Division III background, really helping to find, the student piece of it is going to help you so much farther along the way than athletics in most cases. The starting line, so helping you kind of prep a list, like what should I be looking for? What should I be doing? Some things to consider along that path during the run the race section, and then crossing the finish line. We have a few extra bonus points, some very, I feel like, hot topics and lingo that you're probably hearing that we want to discuss in a little bit more depth. So like we said, the facts and figures behind being a college athlete. So statistically, only 6% of high school athletes go on to play a sport in college, and only 2% of those college athletes receive an athletic scholarship. So this includes full scholarship, this includes partial scholarship. Okay, so being mindful of that. And like we said, just under 1%. So think of 100 student athletes out there, college student athletes, one of them is receiving a full ride scholarship. So if that's your goal as you are, participating in travel sports or AAU or, a high level, you're transferring high schools to play and get in front of people, 1 out of 100 of those student athletes are getting a full ride scholarship. And most college athletes are on a hybrid of both academic and athletic scholarship. So merit-based scholarship plus the athletic scholarships. And I thought this was a really interesting statistic that Reid had added into our presentation about only 6 Division I sports offer full ride. So can you tell us what they are?
Yeah, of course. So it's FBS football, so not FCS, but FBS football, men's and women's basketball, women's gymnastics, women's tennis, and women's volleyball. So the women's sports definitely take the cake on that, and those are what you would call either head count sports or full ride sports. Every other sport that exists at the Division I, Division II level are going to be what we call equivalency sports, and that's what you talk about, that combination of merit aid, academic aid, athletic aid to all combine together and create sort of that comprehensive package. So I know it's going to be a theme of our presentation as we go along, but high GPA, strong test scores, that really can make a huge difference in your recruitability. A lot of people want to separate those two things, but they couldn't be more dependent on one another when it comes to this process.
Definitely. Thank you. So we're going to break down the levels for you just so you get an understanding of maybe where you see yourself or what might be the best fit for you. So we're going to start talk about NCAA. I mean, most people, if you're pursuing college athletics, you know the NCAA, and chances are you know the divisions as well. So Division I, it's getting the airtime, it's getting most of the press, but they have the ability to give the most amount of athletic aid. They have the highest level of competition, heavy emphasis on training. So it's like a full-time job to be a Division I college athlete. And typically the enrollments at these schools are much larger. So we're thinking like in Ohio State and Michigan State, Illinois, but that's not always the case. There are some Division I schools, thinking of like the Patriot League. If you watched the first 4 for the NCAA men's tournament, Wagner, I mean, they have like the equivalency as far as their enrollment of a typical Division III school. But because they have an ability to give full ride scholarships to the number of student athletes that they do, they're considered Division I. Division II, they can give significant athletic scholarship, but there are less full rides available. And typically we see a lot of the partial scholarships that are hybrid with academic and athletic based aid. It's a little bit more balanced. I still think the Division II, there is a lot of expectation that if you're on a scholarship that you're going to be as committed, and there's not a ton of flexibility in Division II because you are on a scholarship, but there is a little bit more school life athletics balance, typically smaller enrollment. And of the 3 divisions in NCAA, we see the least number of schools that fit into this Division II umbrella. And then lastly, Division III, there are no athletic scholarships. And the emphasis is on the strong academics and the student athlete experience. So student athletes are able to pursue other interests while they're playing their sports. They can have internships during the summer, or if they're maybe a fall sports athlete, they can do something in the spring. They can study abroad in the spring. They might be a member of a fraternity or sorority or in a service organization. So there is the flexibility to be an athlete, but also be other things or do other things because they're not having everything dictated by the scholarship piece. And the travel is usually more regional. So again, like with Division I, the Power 5 conferences especially, they have the ability and the budgets to fly their student athletes, across the US. They are getting tons of money maybe from their alumni or their boosters to travel in style. The Division III schools, they just have a little bit more restraint, and they're playing usually schools that are kind of in their wheelhouse. And you added the single association example. So this is completely new to me. So if you want to just touch on that real briefly, that would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So there aren't a ton of them. I put sort of the two most popular, I would say, associations at the bottom. There are some sports that fall just outside of kind of the NCAA purview, if you will. Rugby is another really popular one. That one exists as a club sport at the NCAA level, but it is under the USA Rugby um, blanket or umbrella, if you will. IRA for men's rowing, NCEA for equestrian. These are associations that are sort of independent but parallel to the NCAA, if you will. They don't necessarily have to technically follow the rules of the NCAA, but many of them will sort of follow in step with some of their different recruiting rules. Schools have a little bit more flexibility in how they offer different scholarships potentially in those places, but again, try to stay true to kind of what the NCAA would sort of err on in those different places. So depending on the sport that you play, if it is a bit more niche, sometimes there may be a specific single association that you need to be aware of. Rowing, equestrian, rugby is one, cheer and dance is another. Some of those are ones to just be aware of at the NCAA level.
Great. It's interesting because we had a ton of equestrian seeking students this last cycle. And it forced us to get to become more knowledgeable about that because we, you know, maybe had someone who was looking at like equine, some sort of equine academic program, but for students that were seeking out being a part of an equestrian program, it was a little bit different. Didn't follow in the same parameters.
Yeah, very cool. I think too, and you're going to talk about it a little bit later, but that idea of, club involvement for sports like that too is a massive, massive opportunity for a lot of kids that may think that, oh, that, it's not a varsity supported sport, therefore I can't compete at a high level. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Very true. I'll have you speak a little bit about this. I know you have some junior college experience, but go ahead and hit us with the NAIA and the junior college information.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NAIA is another association, again, parallel to the NCAA, traditionally smaller private schools, a lot of religiously based schools. These are four-year universities. These programs do give athletic aid. To your point on there, I think the comparable athletic sort of rigor you'd put probably in that D2, D3 category, depending on the school, depending on the sport. But it looks very similar to the NCAA in that sense. Again, you're going to see smaller schools. You're going to see a lot more private schools in this space. You're going to see religiously affiliated schools, but definitely an option for kids that want to have that type of experience, but are still looking for that athletic experience in their college life. So that's kind of the NAIA in a nutshell. They have their own eligibility center. They have their own membership map. So all you have to do, Google NAIA, you can see that full map. They've got schools all over the place, and probably one closer to you than you think you might even know.
Mhm.
And then for the NJCAA and the CCCAA, that would be the Junior College Association, and then California's Junior College Association or Community College Association. This is something that we've looked at, traditionally in the past as sort of a stepping stone for a lot of kids, whether it be academically, they need a little bit more time to become NCAA eligible. Maybe they need a little bit more time to mature and either, physically grow for certain sports and or just, from a maturity standpoint, hey, I need a little bit more time. I need to take, classes that are a little closer to home or a little bit smaller. And it can be a great, great opportunity for that. It's a more affordable option many times, gives you that extra year to sort of, kind of slow launch your college experience, if you will. I know I had a lot of beneficial moments. I didn't do the traditional route. I went my sophomore year as opposed to my freshman year. But that year to just really kind of recenter who I was and think about different things and have a smaller environment really is beneficial. I think the one thing to take into consideration when it comes to NJCAA and CCCAA is that while it can be a great opportunity to help you extend that recruiting opportunity, that recruiting trail for yourself, it's not a guarantee. You're effectively re-rolling the dice for another year, right? There's no promise that a coach is going to see you a year from now, want to take you. If it wasn't happening senior year, it's not as if you're guaranteed to have an opportunity at the that first year. So you have to be very purposeful when you make that decision. If it is based on sports and based on recruiting, and you have to try and find a place, that has a coach who's willing to advocate for you and really give you the opportunity to put yourself, in the forefront to be able to compete with different places. And that process has changed a little bit now that the transfer portal is as proficient as it is. Doesn't mean that it's not, certainly possible to come out of junior college, but there is a larger pool of kids that you're now competing with at that same age group at the NCAA level, as well as your own junior college level.
Thank you. a lot of good information to consider. I was just finished the book, The Price You Pay for College. I finished that today, and there's a part about the junior college experience and just like you said, the pros and cons. There's definitely some, and I think that's really applicable to the athletic side as well. A lot of what Ron Lieber said about in that book, could really be transferable in the athletics realm as well.
100%.
Okay, let's talk about student athletes. So we've highlighted student here for obvious reasons. You saw in the breakdown, we talked a lot about the importance of academics amongst the divisions. So strong student athletes, they get recruited because the first piece here is recruitability. If you are a good student, chances are you're going to be admissible at that university. So even looking at some of the more prestigious universities, a Duke, a UVA, UNC Chapel Hill, like some of these that have these top-notch athletic programs, you still have to be able to get in. You still need to be able to academically, make the cut. And that's really a gamble for a coach if they are recruiting a five-star athlete that's barely eligible. And that's just another headache for them. So making sure that your academics are at the forefront. Typically, I feel like the athletes, and maybe this is just my experience, but athletes are typically good time managers because they want to be successful. They're usually like those like type A personalities. They want to be really good, the top of the class, the top of the team, and they have to find a way to manage it all. So that's usually a sign, a good recruitability sign. And again, they don't have to worry about down the road. If they're a strong academic student in high school, chances are they're going to bring that over to the college side. And a coach isn't going to have to worry about them staying eligible throughout the season. Affordability, like we mentioned, only 2% of NCAA athletes are on an athletic scholarship, and many of these scholarships can go hand in hand with academic aid. So many non-scholarship athletes are depending on this academic aid for the largest bulk of the scholarship that they're receiving. So again, that's just going to make you more recruitable, and it's going to make it more affordable because the chances that you're getting a full ride are very, very, very slim. And Reid, I always actually think about you with this one when you were telling me a little bit about your story. Like you wish that you would have diversified yourself as a high schooler. Like you had academic interests and you had social interests, but it was just baseball, baseball, baseball. And then when you had baseball taken away, you're like, I didn't really, I wasn't able to really expand on that. So maybe if you want to just take this one and talk a little bit about that, because that was really impactful to me. I'm like, I can see how you could fall into that trap and then lose your identity along the way.
Yeah, of course. I think, it's something that's becoming more and more apparent as we kind of see more kids come out of college sports, and even high school sports, right? I mean, the impact that, travel ball and club ball and things like that have, even at the high school level, you and I were talking about it before this recording even started. It really can consume not only kids, but families. And that kind of has far-reaching impacts, right? Kids slowly, all those interests and all those things you may want to do are taken over by those 3 practices a week, those 4 practices a week, those weekend tournaments, those travel, schedules that seem ridiculous, but we're going to do them because we paid the money and we're on this team and it's a great opportunity. And not to say that those aren't wonderful, wonderful things to fill your time with. I think we can all agree if we're here, sports are a huge part of our life. They're important. We care about them. We love them. And that shouldn't be taken away. But at the same time, you know, what I tell all my kids is, you're not a baseball player, you're someone who plays baseball. You're not a football player, you're someone who plays football. And there has to be those other elements of who you are and what you love and what you want to do baked into your college experience, your high school experience, and everything in between. Because one of the biggest issues that we're finding with college kids is that lack of identity really rears its ugly head whenever sports stop, whether that's after high school, after a year or two of college, at the end of college, shoot, at the end of a pro career, if you're lucky enough to have it, that's going to come for you at some point or another. And the kids who have an ability and have the freedom to be able to explore those other avenues of who they are and what their personality is have a much easier landing than others when it comes to that phase of the process. And I certainly was, I would argue, the poster child for somebody who did not really lean into those different aspects of what I was interested in. And it took me a fair amount of time and understandably a fair amount of therapy to kind of work through that process and kind of relearn who I was without baseball as my identity as a person. And so I think, that flexibility and that ability to lean into the other things that you do and the other things you care about are incredibly important for your overall development. And it allows you to love the sport instead of feeling like you have to do the sport at a certain point, because when it comes to college, some percentage of this becomes a bit of a job, right? There's money tied to it, there's influence tied to it. So it's not going to be 100% rec fun all the time. There needs to be other things in your life that bring you joy so that this can be something that fills your cup instead of drains your cup.
For sure. That was well explained. You took the words out of my mouth. So thank you for giving us more insight on that one.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're at the starting line. Where do we begin on this journey? So I have Reid taking this one over because we feel like building your list is very, very important. And we put athletics at the bottom for a very specific reason. So go ahead and take this one away.
Yes, and I love that we did that. And I know you take this approach. I take this approach. A lot of families kind of look at me a little dumbfounded when we first had this conversation, but this is truly, kind of the funnel in which you want to look for schools, right? That athletics component. I always tell my families, let's work backwards, right? What you think you want to do, let's work backwards from there. Because, when we think about picking a college from an athletic standpoint, right? The fun thing to talk about is the sports. That's the thing that we all sort of comes to mind. And there's TV and there's all the gear and there's all these things. But really what we're doing is we're putting style over substance. That's kind of what it comes down to, right? So, as a Great British Bake Off fan, Paul Hollywood would always tell me, don't do style over substance. Same thing like this. It's like finding a partner in life, right? When you're dating, it's like cooking the perfect thing or baking the perfect thing. It's like looking for a job opportunity. It's easy to sort of fall on the vanity aspects of what it means to make this decision, but those vanity aspects are 20 to 30% of your overall college experience. Whereas this academic interest major, the size, the distance, the selectivity, the affordability, all these other pieces that make up the core college decision-making process, that's 70 to 80% of your college experience, right? You can't spend every moment of your life on the field, on the rink, wherever, whatever platform you play on. You can't spend that in with just your team. You can't spend that with just your coach, just on the road. Most of your college experience, whether you play sports or not, is going to be done at college. So if you don't love where you are, if you don't love what you're studying, if you don't enjoy the people that you're around, and honestly, we have the statistics. If you don't love the area that you're in, because that's most likely where you're going to end up for your first job for the first 3 to 5 years, all of these things are going to work against you. And someday you're going to have a bad day at practice, or you're going to have a bad game, or coach is going to say something to you that doesn't make you feel very good, or that freshman's going to come in and he or she's going to start looking really good at your position, and that's going to be a little bit stressful. So what do we do when that happens? Do we have a great environment and a great foundation built into our college selection process that's going to help us make it through those times? Or are we going to crumble because that's the only leg we have to stand on when it comes to our college experience? And that's what a lot of kids will fall into because they get caught into the vanity of it. So when we talk about building our list, we really do want to work backwards. We want to focus on what are the foundational aspects that are going to make me as an individual happy, and what are the aspects that are going to help me grow into the person that I want to become, both in my sport and out of my sport. And once we've identified those schools, now let's plug that sport back in and let's see where it fits. And let's let coaches tell us if it makes sense for us to explore the sports angle or not explore the sports angle. And then we can make the decision on what of those schools we want to pursue and move forward with. But that, to me, is the most ethical approach when it comes to building that college list and looking at different options, really, whether you're a student athlete or not a student athlete, right? We want to make it seem like this different thing, and it's really not. It's an extra layer, but it's not necessarily different in how we approach that process.
Yeah. And I feel like too, the athletics portion of it can be so fleeting. You're one injury away from never playing again. The coach could get fired, or the coach could take a job at the next division, or a parallel school. There might be some sort of drama on the team that you can't really gauge when you're taking, your half-hour visit, or you're doing your overnight. And I try to just tell students that I'm working with, if athletics was eliminated, would you still be happy? If it just went poof and it was gone, is that where you see yourself? And I know, there's other things like selectivity and affordability that are kind of outside that scope, but I think that is a good litmus test to say, if this was gone, will this still be the place for me?
100%. And that actually, one quick point on that as well, because I really like the point that you made. I think a lot of kids, I know I was this way whenever I would watch things like this as a kid, in my brain, I think, well, I'm not that kid. I'm going to keep pushing through. I'm not going to get hurt. It's not going to happen to me. I would even ask this question to parents. These coaches, their livelihood is dependent on the success of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, right? That's a reality of college sports. So that coach can tell you a lot of things, and they can truly believe a lot of the things that they tell you in those conversations about being a starter, being on the team, and are going to make all these different things. At the end of the day, that coach's ability to keep their family in the city that they're in, to keep their kids in the school that they're in, to be able to provide for those families is reliant on the success of that team. So if someone comes along and is going to help that coach keep their family where they want their family to be longer, that is going to take precedent over your feelings, your emotions, how hard you've trained, or anything in between. So despite, we can control the things we can control, but we can't control the things we can't control. And we have to make decisions with that in mind. Just knowing that that is a factor outside of anything we have any agency on.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So, all right, I think I'm gonna have you take the next one as well, because we talked a lot about like the recruiting platforms. I know you have some passionate thoughts on those, so I will let you take this one away.
Yes. So, briefly want to talk on those. I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of, NCSA, sports recruits. There's, I think at last count, we had about 64 different platforms. I think the last time we went and checked all of them. What I will say about that is, regardless of whether you decide to work with Alyson or I or anything in between, I just want you to be aware that the platforms that are built and the platforms that are made out there, they are intended really to get numbers on the platforms. That's, a lot of the revenue that comes from those different platforms come from ad space, and ad space happens when they get more people on the platform. So those programs and those organizations are rewarded for simply the number of kids that sign up and make a profile, and not from the success metrics of those kids that are on set profiles. And so there's a lot of sort of upselling that happens. There's a lot of promises that happen. Myself, the other student athlete advisors that I work with, every year, a healthy portion of our client base comes from these organizations that are sold a bag of goods, realize that that's not necessarily the priority of those recruiting platforms, and they come and do something different. Now, having a presence on there, having a free profile, being able to host videos, being able to share, I have no problem with any of that. It's a great, free option for a lot of kids to be able to do that. Just something to be aware of when they start to text and call and tell you that you're behind and fearmonger and a lot of those things. That's where I start to get a little bit upset, and that, they're telling high school freshmen that they're already behind, and that's just preposterous. So don't sort of fall into that piece of the puzzle. But what I really want to focus on is the get recruited part. And I think the big thing to focus on here is that for high school kids, the two main differentiators when it comes to getting recruited is taking a proactive approach to the process and learning how to advocate for yourself. And those are two things that I think high school kids not only need to learn for this, but for life. I think it's just helpful. And this is a really good way to kind of lean into that. So, you see recruiting questionnaires here, social media, personal reach outs. Those to me are that's kind of the holy grail, if you will, of these proactive reach out strategies, right? The goal isn't necessarily to make sure a coach likes you. The goal is to make sure a coach sees you and can evaluate you. At the end of the day, coaches are going to have their preferences, just like everybody does have their preferences about anything, right? In baseball, it's, hey, do you want a guy that throws fast? Do you want a guy that has a bunch of different pitches? Do you want a guy that's 6'6" and releases the ball right next to the mound? None of those are the wrong answer, but coaches may have a preference on what they prefer when it comes to that. You can't control those things, but what you can control is how much you advocate for yourself and how proactive you are in getting yourself in front of those different coaches. And so recruiting questionnaires, they can be found on websites for schools. I'd say probably 90% of schools out there have these recruiting questionnaires on their athletics websites. It's a great initial way to show interest to a school. I'll tell you right now, they're kind of boring. You fill out a lot of basic information, but doing your due diligence on that, getting into the internal system, being able to be in the loop on different camps and places that those coaches are going to be, very positive, very helpful in the process. Social media, Twitter still kind of remains as one of the stronger places for connection with coaches. That's mainly because the NCAA has an API integration with Twitter that allows coaches to know whether or not you are eligible or not eligible under NCAA recruiting guidelines based on your age. if you put in a correct birthday. And so coaches feel more comfortable seeing information on there. They can see a thread of videos of different PRs or numbers based on the sport that you're playing. It's a really easy way to get a snapshot for a coach to see you, right? Something as simple as setting up your bio, setting up videos effectively, and then following a coach. What's our natural inclination as human beings, right? Oh, who just followed me? You go look at that. Now you've just created a 5-second opportunity for yourself for a coach to see, okay, on the picture, hey, that's a person who plays the sport that I coach. I'm going to check this out. Hey, on the bio, I can see that the grades are awesome. The test grade, the test scores are awesome. Here's the position they play. Here's the base information I need. Oh, and there's a video pinned to the top. Yeah, I'll watch it for 30 seconds and see what's going on. Now all of a sudden you've created a recruiting opportunity for yourself simply by going through the process of finding those coaches and making that initial first step. And then finally, personal reach outs. I'm a huge fan of email. The vast majority of emails for coaches are available on the athletics pages or on staff directories, athletic staff directories. You can find those. Reaching out to coaches directly and letting them know you're interested, and then staying consistent and continuing to let them know that you're interested, are huge aspects of this process. And again, it just takes so many kids and so many families, I think, believe, hey, I'll go to all these showcases or I'll play on these really fancy teams. Coaches are going to see me, they're going to reach out to me, and then that's going to be great. And that may happen. You may get reached out to by some coaches, but to me, that's the equivalent of speed dating. You're going to an event, you're letting a coach see you for 30 seconds, they're making a snapshot decision, and you don't know if that's the right fit for you as a school. You don't know if the right coach is seeing you at the right time. All these sort of things have to line up for that to be the perfect scenario. Whereas if you, like we talk about, reverse engineer it, if we're identifying schools that we're excited about, and then we're putting ourselves in a position to be seen and evaluated by those schools, now we're upping the opportunity to make great fits with colleges. And we have more than just, hey, you saw me at a tournament. We have, hey, I want to be an aerospace engineer, but I also want to play baseball. Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology allows me to do both of these things and have that good balance that I'm looking for. Let's get in front of these places, and we don't have to go all the way to Indiana to make it happen. So that's a lot of what we talk about when we talk about getting recruited is being proactive and not being afraid to tell people the things that you've accomplished and the things that you've done, so coaches can make an accurate evaluation of what that looks like for them to fit or not fit on their program.
Shout out to Rose-Hulman's men's baseball team. My best friend's husband is their head coach.
I think I have a kid who played for him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He was at WashU prior. So I
Cool.
also have a question. Would you recommend that a student athlete reaches out to an assistant coach or a recruiting coordinator at like a Division I, if that's what they're looking for, or just go right to the head coach?
Definitely. I think, head coaches nowadays, and it's a little different division to division, obviously, but especially at that Division I level nowadays, head coaches, I would argue, are more managers of brands, in a lot of senses. And so, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have a designated recruiting coordinator. It's usually going to be indicated on their bio or on their title that you can see. Also specific position coaches, right? If you do a particular event in track and field, if you play a particular position, volleyball, football, whatever it might be, baseball, those are the coaches that you want to look for and you want to try to put in there. I have kids, they'll probably max out at 4 coaches per email, but they're going to put all those coaches on the same thread, mostly because you don't want to fall into quite literally just a logistical issue where, if you send 4 different emails, first off, that's 4 times the work. And now you have a situation where this coach maybe thinks that this coach responded, this coach thinks that this coach responded. There's no insight in there. And so it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Whereas if you're purposeful in finding the coaches that fit the positions that you want to play or fit the roles. Sometimes there's also territories. Some coaches will look at different sections of the state or sections of the country, and they'll point that out as well. If you go through the effort of finding those correct coaches and putting them all on the same thread, now they can get together, determine who needs to respond, and make sure that it gets addressed during that process. So that's a great question.
All right, good point. Thank you. All right, so we added a slide with the QR code for the NCAA Eligibility Center. So if you have any interest in playing NCAA athletics, this is required for those of you that are looking to play Division I, Division II. So would require scholarship or looking for scholarship money. If you're not sure, just do this. You can take your phone, you can scan it right now and fill it out, but it will just help determine if you're eligible, for, like I said, for Division I or Division II. It'll allow them to review your transcripts and just allow you to maintain your amateur status. You'll be given a number that you would need to reference. And then, like I said, it's just something that we would recommend all of you to do if you think that this is your future, even if you're not sure what division you'll land into. So I'll keep that up for a second. And you can make sure you do that, or you could just go online and find it as well. If you don't have your phone with you, just just type in NCAA Eligibility Center into Google and you'll be good to go. So we're narrowing things down and we're finding the right fit. So other considerations that we listed here are, will you have the ability while you're a student athlete to pursue other opportunities in college? So like Reid was mentioning, just the ability to be flexible and not be one dimensional. The goal of your 4 years or 5 years in college, or maybe you're going on to get a master's degree, is to be employable. Like, where are you going to end up after you're done with your college experience? Are you going on to grad school? Are you going to are you looking for a particular job opportunity? But will you have an opportunity during those 4 or 5 years to do an internship? Can you do a co-op? For those of you that don't know what a co-op is, it's essentially you go to school for one semester and then the next semester you are working full-time in your intended field while getting paid. So that's kind of a cool opportunity. University of Cincinnati is really well known for their co-ops. Professional networks, maybe you want to pursue Greek life. Maybe you're really tied to a particular service organization. Can you do those things while you're being a student athlete? Also looking at retention rate. So do the students love it there? Are they coming back between their freshman and sophomore year? The strength of your college degree. So like we talked a little bit about placement, maybe into a job right out of college within 6 months or into a particular grad school. Just, is that going to be something, will your degree basically carry you to your next step in your experience as well? And then the affordability. This is always like it shouldn't be, but it tends to be an uncomfortable conversation amongst families. But it needs to be a very serious one. The debt crisis is very, very real. Having a strategy and knowing, whether you're doing your SAI like through the FAFSA, so your estimated basically your estimated family contribution per year, and also if you have an opportunity to do a net price calculator, especially if you're looking at maybe a private school like a Division III school where there is no athletic money in play, knowing how much that's going to cost you and being able to prepare for that and building your list accordingly. So and understanding too, I mean, I know Reid and I would be able to help with that if you were working with us, just to like understand your letter a little bit more. What is money that is going to be free money? What is money that is going to be expected to be paid back or borrowed? Okay, so these are things we definitely want you to consider as you're building that list as well. So we're almost there. We have some hot topics to discuss and extra considerations. I am tasking Reid with this. He did a really fantastic job with some data from a presentation a few weeks ago. And I know we talk a lot about the transfer portal and we talk a lot about NIL. So I'm going to have him take the next few slides in regards to this.
Yeah, thank you. So, like you said, I've kind of had my head stuck on this for a while now. It's been really fun to kind of dig into the data and sort of pull away from some of the things we've just heard about and really kind of see what's really happening. Something that I think, when it comes to the transfer portal and the NIL that we're going to talk about soon, I think a lot of it is just sort of kind of bringing us back to center. I think it's really easy and it's really almost fun to talk about these things sort of in very fantastical ways and all the things that are happening. And to say that there isn't sort of, a fair amount of movement happening, especially at the revenue sports, right? FBS football, men's basketball, some women's basketball now too, would be, would be untrue. I think there is certainly that happening. And that's why we've sort of broken that down on this chart here. But what I want to point a lot of people to are the number of transfers that are truly happening at the Division I, the Division II level, right? At Division I level, we've got about 7% of kids transferring year over year. Division II level, we've got about 2.6% of kids transferring year over year. And you put that up against the regular student body that is transferring and changing schools year over year, it's really not all that different. I think a lot of it are, obviously there's an element of this, especially at the Division I level, of kids that are moving, and there is some money related aspect to that. There's playing related aspect to that. But the number one reason for transferring for men and for women right now is mental health. And you dig a little deeper, that's a very broad topic. The NCAA is getting better about kind of digging more in the weeds on this, but they ask more questions, and the main thing is sort of a lack of belonging at a lot of these places. And sometimes that can be tied to playing time, but a lot of times it's kids that have an opportunity to play somewhere, maybe doesn't feel quite right, but hey, I'm going to go get to be a college athlete. So I'm going to give this a shot and I'm going to go play, and I'm going to sacrifice these other aspects of what I want in a college to have that opportunity to go do that. They play for a year, they realize, oh man, that stuff was really quite important. And now they're looking for a place that's going to better fit that overall experience. And so if you look at the charts up here, we've got Division I on the left, Division II on the right. 43% and 39% on those left bars, those blue bars, that's the percentage of transfers in each division that are football and basketball players. So almost half for Division I, over a third in Division II. So, you know, uh, they only take up about 22% of the actual athletes overall in either one of those divisions, but they're almost half, almost a third. Those numbers aren't quite, they're a little inflated on both sides. And then if you look at the green graphs on the right there for each for Division I and Division II, what we find is that the vast majority of kids are staying within their own division, right? 81% of kids are staying in Division I whenever they transfer on that side. 76% of kids are staying Division II when they transfer on that side. So this idea that they're using it as sort of this up and down and all around and all that kind of stuff is really not, the data doesn't really support that. Yeah, there's a little bit of movement that happens, but for the most part, it's kids that are slotted appropriately that are just trying to find that better fit school. They might have gotten a little ahead of themselves or jumped the gun a little bit early on where they wanted to go and are finding a place that's a little bit better fit now. So I think overall that just kind of provides a little bit of context around the transfer portal. It can be something that you hear about and go, oh my gosh, like it's getting out of hand. Like we got to slow this thing down. And I agree, there are definitely some things that we could probably do to make it a little bit more fair for everybody included. But overall, it's kind of working how we would want it to work, I think, in a grand scheme. So just wanted to get some context on the transfer portal. We can move on now to NIL. I should truncate my thoughts here. I could go on forever, but that's not what we're here for. Okay, so for NIL, I think this one, same thing, right? It's a hot button topic. People have a lot of opinions on it. It's in Congress. It's in, there's lawsuits going on. There's all this kind of stuff going on. The reality is that it's affecting, sort of a much smaller group of kids than we all ever really think about. And we'll talk about kind of why that is here in just a second. But there's over 500,000 kids that are competing in the NCAA. Only 22% of them are football and basketball players, yet almost 70% of NIL market share is held by football and basketball. And that's primarily at the Division I level, because those are the revenue sports. That's where the TV money is. That's where the ad space is. That's where the notable names are. That's who's really dominating sort of that whole NIL marketplace. And if we go to the next slide, we can kind of see what that looks like, because even though, they cover 70% of the market, if you really break it down, the handful of college kids who are really dominating that market share is really quite evident when you look at the data. So when you look on the left here, this is kind of a general breakdown of the market value of certain players and then certain demographics. And so you see at the top here, I've got Shedeur Sanders, Olivia Dunn, also known as Livy Dunn, Caitlin Clark, Arch Manning over at Texas. These are these monster value kids on the NIL side that we all kind of focus on, right? And this chart, in my opinion, is a really good comparison to what we see on the consulting side, which is, you can slot in Harvard instead of Shedeur Sanders and Yale instead of Olivia Dunn. And, all of this time and money and effort is spent on these, let's say, 10 schools that we all know about and care about, that gets all of the attention and all the articles and all the money and all that kind of stuff. And then here's everybody else that exists underneath that blanket. And that's the average gymnastics player or competitor at the Division I level. Their average NIL is $7,000, which is quite high, taking into consideration that many of them are competing on the Olympic scale. So that's a lot of where that money's coming from. The average Division I football player is taking home about $3,300. Again, that's generally tied to the brand of the school, right? University of Texas is brokering quite a few deals. Kids are benefiting from those deals or from those collectives. That's a lot of where that comes from. The average athlete in college right now, their average NIL deal is about $53. So you and a friend go out to dinner and there's your NIL money for the month that you've spent from your deal. And so that's really, the vast majority of kids are having very normal experiences, because the reality is that trying to be a student, trying to be an athlete, and trying to be a small business owner at 18, 19 years old is not sustainable for the vast majority of kids. It's just not. So where NIL really comes in handy for the 99.9% of kids that don't have primetime Deion Sanders as their dad, or don't already have a million followers like Livy Dunn before she even made it to college, or redefined, women's basketball like Caitlin Clark, or part of the most, dominant quarterback family in the entire world for football, Arch Manning. If you don't have that as your background, you're just trying to be a college kid. And that's the vast majority of kids that are doing that. And they're doing it through local social media deals. They're doing it through local brand ambassadors and going to the Raising Cane's down the street and signing autographs for an hour or whatever it might be. And then for these, these massive kids that are massive because of probably different elements other than just the fact that they play college sports, that's where you hear about these equity and these investment opportunities and all this kind of stuff. And so that's fun to talk about, and that's where all the articles come from, but that is not the realistic experience of a kid in college today. So again, I think just kind of setting the realistic context of what that looks like is important for families as they start to read about all these different things that are happening in that space.
So interesting. I love it. I feel like the $53, like that's like 4 pizzas or something, when you really break it
Yeah.
down. But very good perspective. And you're right. These, few people get so much limelight, makes it feel like it's such a big deal. And it, you know, really doesn't impact that many students overall.
Mhm.
All right, so we'll round this out. We're going to try to be mindful of your time. We only have one more slide to discuss. And there are other ways to get involved. So if competitive college athletics is not for you, there are still ways that you can continue playing and enjoying and loving the sports that you've been participating in for so long. So the first one's club sports, and I feel like Reid had said with rugby, club sports at many schools are still extremely competitive. There's still some travel involved. You get the swag. It's just not a varsity sport. So being mindful that if you're still looking to play at a high level, but maybe you didn't get a scholarship to Ohio State, you can still play on Ohio State's men's basketball club team or women's basketball or volleyball. Intramural sports, obviously, this is a great way to get exercise, to continue playing, recreationally, to make some friends and to get, to make some connections on campus. So do not rule out intramural sports. International sport, do you want to touch on this one real fast? Because I was like, what is that? And it's so interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So this is kind of my crusade, if you will. I'm spending quite a bit of time on this now, but at the undergrad level, it's a little bit less popular, but certainly at the postgrad level, the UK, Canada, there's U Sports, there's Bucks. They have their own sort of parallel associations at those levels that allow you to play competitive sport, right? Oxford plays American football against Cambridge and against University of Western England and different places, and it operates probably closer like a club sport. But the way that they work over there is they have it dedicated and baked into your schedule. So again, you're allowed to do all the things you want to do. They have space available for athletics. Sometimes that can't even come with a little bit of athletic money or benefits when it comes to training opportunities and things like that. But certainly an option, and especially as the tuition rates continue to rise in the U.S., there's some really affordable options that allow you to still play your sport in some really cool places around the world.
That's awesome. So also managerial roles. So again, if you have, you really love the camaraderie of a team and maybe you're pretty knowledgeable or you feel like you could be an asset to a program, like I think of like if you're like the Rudy, someone who just like loves Notre Dame football and you're committed to it, but you're never going to be on the team, even though Rudy was on the team. There might be a role for you as a manager and also student coach. Some people, they understand that they might not be the skilled, the fastest, the strongest, but they have a knack for the game. They know the X's and O's. Please do not underestimate the value of a really strong student coach. I mean, they are such an asset. And it's a great thing too, if you were looking to maybe pursue coaching at the collegiate level down the line, or maybe professional coaching, it's a great in. So being a student coach would be a great role. And also sport media and marketing. So again, if maybe you're ready to hang up the laces, maybe you have some injuries, but just really, really love sport, that's a whole nother avenue. I mean, there are sport management programs, sport media programs, but even if you're not a sport management or sports media major or broadcasting, you might be able to get in with like your sports radio, or you could volunteer or work hourly with your SID. So those are a lot of different options that, the big schools, the small schools, and everywhere in between are looking for good student workers to do those roles. So we have reached the end of our presentation. Hopefully you found this extremely beneficial. Please feel free, again, we're going to send the recording out with any extra pieces of information that Reid and I find to be necessary to send along. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to check to see if we have any questions. Does the 1% of full scholarships number that you're showing include those in head count sports?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that would be essentially the 1%. When you break down what that number is and the number of headcount sports even available at the college level versus the other equivalency sports, it comes out to about 1%.
Okay. And then our other question was, how do you know at which level you should be participating in? How do you get evaluated?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure. Go ahead. You give insight.
So the approach that I like to take with this is I think having honest feedback with a coach who you trust is a great first step, right? And I think it's also, coming into that sort of maturity aspect of who these athletes are, being able to go up to a coach and say, this is a goal that I have. I want you to be honest with me right now today. Where do you see me slotted? What are the things that I should improve on? Where are my strengths? And understanding what those things are not only helps you improve over time, but helps you get a good idea of sort of, where an outside, a third party source might see you on the recruiting side. A lot of these coaches have relationships with other college coaches. They kind of know how they think. So I think a good starting point is that. But what I will say is all the kids that I work with will get suggested colleges from Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, and then sometimes even NAIA and beyond. Not because I'm being lazy, but because I think that it's important for kids to learn how to put themselves out there and get in front of coaches and let sort of that coaching ecosystem tell you where you belong. So if you are proactive, if you make yourself known, if you provide that video and you reach out to these schools, coaches tend to do a pretty good job, whether it be a lack of response or a telling you that these are the numbers that they're looking for, or continuing to invite you to camps and show interest. They can kind of give you a good indicator of where you fall in their eyes on their recruiting board. You're not going to get that exact number of like, hey, you're number 3 on our board or whatever, but you'll be able to sort of get an idea of what types of schools are responding back. And then once you start to get that feedback, you can decide as a family, hey, is this a level that I'm comfortable with and I want to be a part of? And then I can lean into that, or I can try to make adjustments either by improving or leaning, stepping away from some of the recruiting piece and focusing more on the athletics or academics and kind of making a decision from there. So that's my philosophy behind that. Trying to read coaches' minds is something I've never enjoyed trying to do.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree, definitely agree. I feel like finding someone who is very objective in the process, and I think that's hard too when you're really close to a club coach, an AAU coach, because they're essentially being paid to promote you and tell you how great you are, and you I think you've been doing lessons with me for this long and whatnot. But even asking someone in their circle, like, could you have someone else that you really respect, just come evaluate me and give me like a clear, honest answer on what level they think I should be participating at. And like you said, I think it's very telling if you were to create your list based on the other things we discussed, like academics and fit and size and location and setting and whatnot, and then making that list and diversifying it between the divisions. If you send a video out, a 30-second video out to a bunch of Division 1s and you don't get one chirp back, that might be your answer. If you have a bunch of Division 3 coaches that are really responding to you and think you're the right fit, like that might be the lane that you want to stay in. So hopefully that's helpful, but I think just finding someone subjective and kind of outside of your circle, your immediate circle, maybe leaning on that person that you trust to find someone that they would trust to be a good evaluator might be a good place to start.
Definitely.
So, well, that is the only question. Those are the only two questions we have. Oh, yep, only two questions we have. So thank you so much, Reid, for joining us. We're so appreciative. Again, we will send out this recording to everyone who has registered. I know it's well, it's a nice summer. It's maybe not as nice in Texas, but it's a nice summer night here. So it's hard to sometimes capture people in the evening, but we had a lot of people register who are definitely going to take advantage of the recording. And thank you again so much for your time and all of your insight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Anytime. All right. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and thank you for joining us.